Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin our session, which is a book launch of Water in the Wilderness, Life in the Coast, Deserts and Mountains of Pakistan by Mehjabeen Abidi-Habib, Richard Garstang and Rina Saeed Khan. Our speakers for this session are Mehjabeen Abidi-Habib and Rina Saeed Khan. Our moderator for this session is Vaqar Zakaria. I would like to request the people in the hall to please maintain silence during the session, especially the volunteers in the back. I will take this opportunity to introduce Vaqar Zakaria. He is a recognized environmental specialist in Pakistan with experience in environmental assessment and protected area management. He served on the National Council for Conservation of Wildlife and was instrumental in setting up the Himalayan Wildlife Foundation. Over to you, sir.
Welcome everybody to discussion on this very, very interesting work. I've known Mehjabeen for a long time, and it was after about 10 years that I met her again when this book was all done and finished, and I started talking to her and made the remark that you're not the Mehjabeen I used to know. And she says that, well, you're not the Vaqar I used to know. So over these journeys and over these times, what we have done, what we have learned has changed us quite a bit. We're different people doing different things, looking at things in a different way. That's something I'd explore with Mehjabeen later today. I understand we're going to first show Rina, we're first going to show a video. Right, could we start with that? And following that, we'd have a discussion on the book itself.
Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to introduce the documentary on behind the scenes making of the film, of this book actually. This film was made last year by Walkabout Films with support from the Heinrich Böll Foundation. But first, a few words about the book, Water in the Wilderness. This book was started more than 12 years ago when I had just returned from London, where I did my master's in environment and development. So it has taken over a decade to complete this book. Mehjabeen, our lead author, calls it a labor of love. It certainly has been a labor. Hundreds of hours of research, traveling, writing, rewriting, editing, and just plain thinking has gone into this book. The team has traveled all the way to the British Museum in London and further afar to the shores of Lake Como in Italy, where we completed the manuscript for the book in 2012. We received a grant from the Rockefeller Foundation to complete the manuscript. When we started the book, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor was just a theory. In our chapter on Gawadar's elusive gold rush, we refer to it as a long-term vision for Gawadar that will eventually be turned into a reality. And that is exactly what is happening now. Like the envisioned route of the CPEC, the book starts from the coast, Gawadar and Jeevani, and moves up through the deserts and plains and into the high mountains of Pakistan. The last three chapters, which are my favorite ones, are on Shandur, the Deosar Plateau, and the high-altitude glaciers of Pakistan. These are the glaciers that provide the Indus River, our lifeline, with the water which makes our agricultural economy possible. My co-author, Richard Garstang, who unfortunately can't be with us here today as he now lives in South Africa, served as conservation advisor with WWF Pakistan for many years. He told me years ago, how many of us are aware that Pakistan has the greatest change in elevation within any sovereign state on earth, from 0 meters at Samyani Bay to 8,611 meters, the summit of K2. The dramatic changes in altitude means extremely diverse physical environments with wildlife ranging from marine turtles on the coast to snow leopards in the mountains. During our many journeys for Water in the Wilderness, some of which have been captured in this film, we traveled from the coast to the high mountains, often staying in remote rest houses and occasionally tents out in the wild. I must say we were never scared or felt insecure. We faced dust storms in the deserts, freezing temperatures at night, in the mountains, annoying army officers who were too eager to help, and the occasional flat tire on our travels, but that was all part of the adventure. We visited the Makran coast before the highway was complete, and we ventured into remote seaside villages that had barely seen outsiders before. We met little children who lived without electricity and yet asked us if they could get computers. In the Cholistan desert, we toured the beautiful but crumbling Deravar fort that rises from the desert like an immense castle. We met the nomads or warrior herdsmen, as Mehjabeen calls them, who traverse the desert in search of water. In Shandur, which we visited during the polo tournament held in the summer, we were shown around the lake and introduced to its majestic wilderness by Colonel Khushwaqtul Mulk, the last prince of Mastuj. In this film, we have used moving footage of our team, supplied by our photographer Aisha Villani. Aisha, of course, is responsible for all the stunning photographs in the book, some of which are featured in the film. We also use still photographs taken by us on our travels, and the rest of the spectacular footage of Hingol, Cholistan, Shandur, and Devasai is from the archives of Walkabout Films. I hope the film gives you a few glimpses of what it was like to travel across Pakistan, one of the most diverse and fascinating countries in the world. The documentary is around 8 minutes long, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Beyond the central plains of the Indus River, there are little-known places in Pakistan. Fragile freshwater lakes, desert salt pans, faraway rivers and glaciers, where nature and people live as they have for centuries in unbroken continuum. Years ago, a small team of dedicated environmentalists set out to write a book that would inspire its readers with Pakistan's seamless beauty, culture and nature. Ecologist Dr. Mehjabeen Abidi-Habib, conservationist Richard Garstang, and journalist Saeed Khan, along with photographers Aisha Villani and Javed Ahmed Khan, undertook a series of journeys into the remote hinterlands of the country. Starting from Pakistan's coastline and ending in its high mountains. Comprising a team of predominantly women, the making of this book merits note in the conservation history of Pakistan, not least because of the field adventures faced during its preparation. From flat tires to sandstorms, the team had to persevere through the dedicated field expeditions spread over 4 years. Each expedition was meticulously organised, based on historical research, fresh scientific findings and photographic plans. The authors ended up staying in windswept camps and lonely guest houses from the Makran coast to the Shandor mountain pass. The objective was to produce a book that inspires a deeper understanding of the enduring identity of Pakistan's diverse cultures and ecology. While collecting stories of change and documenting landscapes and cultural identities. The book is divided into 9 chapters, illustrated by art-quality photographs. Each chapter tells its own story around a particular location. In the Makran coast is a wilderness area around a pristine river that contains Hinglaj, a sacred Hindu nature temple where people of different faiths congregate in harmony. While some might think of this as barren emptiness, it remains a sacred landscape, rendering integrity to a fragile natural balance. Lung is an oxbow lake in the old bed of the Indus, now an agricultural hinterland of Sindh and a favoured staging site for thousands of migratory birds from Siberia. Lung has been given special protection by the Sindh government as a sanctuary for migratory birds where hunting is not allowed. In the north, high up in an area once known as Little Tibet, the Deosai Plateau is a high-altitude, grassy plain just below Nanga Parbat mountain, contributing some 20% of the waters of the Indus, as would a great sponge. Deosai has been declared a national park, and its unique brown bears may yet endure and thrive in their wilderness home. The book's central message is that economic growth, with its zeal for modern transformation, may cause the loss of ancient and fragile fusions that form the people and nature of Pakistan, a region at the crossroads of civilizations.
Thank you. I just wanted to say something about Vaqar and who he is in the context of this work. The book is called Water in the Wilderness, and there is a chapter called Water in the Wilderness also, which is the title of the chapter on Deosai, which you just saw in the film. And the conservation history of Deosai, which is so central to all of our lives here because of the water, partly because of the water it gives us all, is the history is rooted in Vaqar Zakaria and his colleague Anisur Rahman. So that chapter is very centered on Vaqar's life's work, and it's very special for me to have someone who features in the book here today. So it's a special honor to have Vaqar here. We are very proud of him and the legacy that his life will leave our grandchildren in Pakistan.
Mehjabeen, I'm honored to hear this from you. Let me open up going through the book. It's quite interesting that emotions, conflicts, relationships with nature, with people in our work as they emerged. People ask me why don't you write about it? Well, just way too busy doing it to get down to writing it. And when I started reading this, I said, yes, this is saying a lot of things that I wanted to say. So thank you for putting those down. But opening up your very first words in your introduction, boundless protection. We all go in to see something. At times we are tourists. You went in, you saw a lot, right from the coast all the way. You'd say, imagine a mother's feelings for the child in her womb, instinctive, enfolding, boundless protection. You must have seen all these places before also, and then when you went in to write the book and you experienced it again, how do you feel about owning it, seeing the vulnerability of it, and feeling that something needs to be done to keep it in a better way?
Well, this is touching at the heart of why this book was written, because understanding something deeply, and my intention in bringing this book together was to share a deep understanding of the connections between people and nature, having looked at what they have been for centuries and the types of rapid changes that we are unleashing. Invites in me not anger, but a desire to understand deeply, thereby to love. And when you love, you feel inspiration. And when you feel inspiration, you feel a need to protect. And in that process, you, the human being, are transformed. And this sentiment, which is informed by research, but also touches all of our hearts, is a very universal state of being. So that's a little bit of where this comes from, this notion of boundless protection. The other point is that when I interacted deeply with people who have lived in natural systems historically, you see that to feel protected by the forest or the desert or the fearsome glaciers around you and to be one with them is truly what all of us should feel about nature. It is a very archetypal way of being with nature. And the pain of alienation that we feel in the cities of our world it's a very important reminder that we are governed by nature, we are begotten by nature, and we die into the arms of nature. So that's a little bit of where that comes from.
Before I go on, please, from the audience, if there's anything you'd like to say, contribute, or ask, please just raise your hand and feel free to join in. Mehjabeen, let me get down to use the word how we relate, our relationship. Now we all know about relationships, personal and others. And I went into a relationship with nature some time back, and you know what the relationships do. They change both. But in the relationships, there is a lot of learning, there is a lot of growing together. But in the relationships, there is also the hurt. And going through the book, there are places where there's an incredible hurt in terms of what we're doing to the water, what we are doing to what it gives to us. Katerina, for example, a bird comes from long distances, struggles to get across, tries to find ways, finally makes it, and then something happens, and pulling of the trigger, such things. Do you think that, do we really, to understand our relationship with water, is it really necessary that we hurt it, damage it, destroy it, and then value it? That's what we seem to be doing in our conflicting relationship. How do you see that emerging?
Well, it's a funny thing. As I interacted with communities all over Pakistan, I saw that where there has been no hurt, there is such seamless connection. So let me give you an example. The Makran coast is a place where very few human beings have lived for the past thousands of years. But human beings pass on the Makran coast as routes of passage. And traditionally, this has been a place where camel keepers have taken goods through the Makran coast. It's a very hostile environment. So Marco Polo and Alexander, all of these people report the camel trade along the Makran coast with fear and wonder at how these camel keepers lived there. So we met one such camel keeper, and I had the privilege of seeing the connection between the man, his camel, and the desert. And as we were interviewing this camel keeper, because he represented a piece of social ecological history, we saw that the camel was a part of his body. It was nestling his ears, it was winding itself around his body, and he hardly noticed. So we said, "What is your relationship with this camel?" And he said, "Oh," and it was as if he had hardly noticed that there was a camel peering round his head as we were talking to him. Another example was an old woman who lives in Rangla, around the lakes in the Thal desert. And we asked her, "So what is your relationship with this water?" And she said, "Oh, we just live around this Dhand, and I'm not really sure, I don't notice it very much." And she was sitting, her entire home, her charpai, everything around her was made from the reeds of this wetland. So she was entirely tied to this wetland. So traditionally, our connections to natural systems has been seamless and unconscious. But when we break that and sever that connection, then the breakage destroys. And when it destroys us, our social fabric, and the ecosystems that it provides, we understand that something sacred, a sacred thread has been broken. And when that happens, there are many reactions that all of us have. My reaction is that of a woman. And so this book is very much a woman's and several women's reactions to the hurt and breakage. So this is what feminists sometimes call a her story. It's not a history, it's a her story. The eyes through which this book takes you are mostly women's eyes. The photographers, the writers, we were all women. And so this book embodies a deeply female sentiment to protect and to warn of the hurt that comes from breaking relationships. But that place also resides in all men. It needs to be invoked. And I think that is what we are seeing in Vaqar. His instinct to protect is being invoked by this work, which I think is a very deeply feminine instinct. which all of us have. Let me just clarify that in case it offends anyone. The Sufi aphorism for the universal soul of humankind, to be human, is always addressed in the feminine gender, in Arabic and in Farsi. So it is part of our tradition to view the feminine in this very special way. These qualities that water also has are very feminine. So Vaqar, I don't know how you feel about this reaction.
You're provoking me to make some confessions over here. Yes, it is like when I left the house at age of 17, somebody told me my mother cried for a long time, and I sort of wondered, what was the problem? Why? And then we go into Deosai and we'd say, we'll go in there, fix a few things, and well, then there'll be somebody else who'll take care of it. And that has not happened. You go back to it again and again. You can't let go because it's vulnerable, it's still not there, and I'd probably die with that feeling one day, and that is where I'd sort of learned what a mother feels. Learning the hard way, though. But you're very, very right. The feminine instinct to nurture, to protect, all the way through all the problems and all the difficulties. That's exactly.
Any reactions? We'd love you to join us in this discussion. We haven't structured it, so if there are any emotions or questions, please do join us. Okay.
Please. The question is that, is there a
Is there a balance that you see for economic growth without breaking this bond, this sacred bond?
You've asked the most difficult question in environment.
You're qualified to answer it at the present moment.
Is there a, how do we balance? I think, let's say...
Yes, how do we groom people to actually keep that bond and respect it, but at the same time grow and flourish and make the best out of it?
You used some interesting words like the sacredness of it.
Yes.
First, in terms of how far we go in economic development, where we stop, where we are losing, where we are gaining, these are the very difficult decisions that people make. But what is at the heart of it? At the heart of it, and that at the heart of it is poetry and science, whether you like it or not. The poetry part of it is the sacredness. You can drink the water in Deosai, and in Kailash also it is the same. These waters are sacred. How do we put a value on a clean water in Deosai? How valuable it is? That comes from your heart. And at the other end, how many tourists one should let in Deosai before that water gets destroyed is the science of it. And you would see that in this book. People have to make these choices. The economists and the scientists would never give you the answers. All they can do is tell you what you're losing and what we're gaining. But the matters of the heart, for that, it's basically what do we tell our next generations? What do they see? How we show them what it all means? How they read the history of what it all means, and for them to go and see these places. And those are the decisions that you're going to make. So we need to value what we have, and then we need to understand the science of it as well, and then take some practical decisions and hope for the best. And if I may, Mehjabeen, you're at times bring it up in a very lovely way, and then the brutal science comes in. And you're, if I recall, you're not really into deep science. I've been into radio collaring bears and doing blood samples and stuff like that, while my partner Anis would look at things in a very holistic way. It's very difficult and very painful when you're confronted with brutal numbers and facts which tell you you can do what you like, but this is going to go another way. How did you, the glaciers are melting or not, and the telemetry and all that, how did you connect to that part of it?
Well, as soon as it's a contest of the mind and the heart, and in that context is a very special opportunity all of us have for a transformative experience. And that is what it feels like to belong as one part of creation, to understand that the cosmos is much bigger than you are. And so it puts you into the correct size, which is very small indeed. So the science and the emotions that are so natural to our humanity is a contest of our times. And the way I look at it, and my PhD training gives me this, is it is the difference between a world that human beings think is merely complicated versus a cosmos that is complex. So modern science reminds us that the difference between complicated and complex is, complicated is what Vaqar does when he earns money, which is and he may be doing certain things, but complicated is sending a rocket to the moon. The chances of getting success are pretty high if you do it the right way. Complex is rearing a child. You don't know the outcomes. You can only look at positive trajectories of what you do. So it is a pathway-based way of looking at things. So when you are in the realm of complexity, which is what the cosmos and this earth is, then you know that you cannot engineer outcomes. You can only do what you can with the life and understanding that you have. And sometimes people ask me, why would anyone write a book that took 10 years to do? And the answer is it certainly doesn't stand up to any market scrutiny. But the real answer is that it comes from a place that is so saturated with a sense of rightness and reaching for our humanity that when I or Vaqar become totally full to the brim, then something comes out of us. In this case, it was the need to share these experiences in a book. Humanity has been known to dance because of this feeling. Humanity writes poetry and music because it is saturated. So that's what Pakistan offers for us.
So, Helga?
Could I ask a question? I recently saw a video from Deosai, okay? And there was a mass movement of ruminants. And these ruminants have been destroying tracts of the indigenous vegetative cover. So how can you avoid this damage in the Deosai? That is something which, because that clean water, that pure water which you are talking about, it's gone. Or it will be gone probably in 2-3 years' time if these ruminants are allowed to continue. Thank you.
That has been much of the work last year, and you hit at the core of the problem there. Basically, the solution for that which has been adopted is that there was traditional grazing. We had traditional rights about 10-15 years back. there was a number of families that were grazing, and we're recognizing their right. But what happened was that the number of animals multiplied by tenfold in the last 10 years. So those numbers are being brought back now to what they were about 15 years back, and that would be hopefully a far better improved balance. But in addition to that, there's a whole bit about visitor management, toilets and things like those, monitoring of the water to make sure that it remains drinkable through times. It's a very difficult balance that if you don't let people in, they don't value what's there. And if they don't value what's there, how would they would protect? But the moment they step in, they do a certain damage. So these are the decisions that we've brought an equilibrium to a point. But as we move on, future generations will have to decide whether they want to close it completely or let more people in.
I think the lady at the front, because you only have 2 minutes left. Appa question tha?
Sorry, I have a very mundane question, but how is this all being affected by the climate change? Is it, I mean, we all got the world going by, and this area is very vulnerable, especially the northern areas. So how do you...
No, it's not a mundane question. It's a very fundamental and important question. And it is the question of our times for these ecosystems that are so precious to the life of Pakistan as a whole. And what science is telling us that in drier areas of Pakistan, it's going to get drier, and in wetter areas of Pakistan, it's going to get wet. So wetter. So farmers, all of us as a nation, are beginning to shift and experiment with how to live in a Pakistan where we have to grow food, feed our animals, and deal with nature that is beginning to change in very uncertain ways. So the key challenge for us all is how to face uncertainty, how to face the unknown. And to me, that is what so much of human history has been about. It's only in the last 200 years that we have a false notion of control and prediction over nature's cycles. This was most of our ancestors' lives, living with total uncertainty. And so I think that some of the knowledge systems and some of our ways of looking at the world are going to have to, in many ways, whilst we embrace new science, we'll have to embrace ways of looking at the world that are more like our ancestors. It is time when the future and the past have to come together, and our 200-year-old bubble of the industrial development is now finally bursting, and a calamity like climate change is making us review all of this.
And,
so it's a general answer, but that's...
I think the biggest and most visible impact has been on our glaciers of climate change. And there's a whole chapter in the book. The last chapter in the book is on the glaciers. And we talk about the melting of the glaciers and how it might possibly impact the plains. And because we are an agricultural economy and where the water comes from the Indus River. And the Indus is fed by the glaciers. So that is, I mean, when we started the book, climate change was not at the forefront as it is now. So I think that is something that is slightly, I think towards the end of the book in the mountain chapters, it's certainly, talked about.
Please.
Yeah, I think there are two interesting words, that is the balance and sacredness. When we think about balance, for example, and if we think about in context of Pakistan, we don't have too many numbers with respect to tourists. For example, just take the example of Italy or France, the countries which are receiving, for example, 10 million tourists annually, and we have very few numbers. So therefore, I think at present, it may be more interesting for us, or maybe more in our larger interest, that we should focus more on economic side, bringing more tourists to such things or such places. And with respect to sacredness, the question that is sacred, these are sacred. But here, there is a very interesting ethical question as well. For example, just look about this culture in Chitral. Definitely it's sacred to these people and for us as well. But should we live with these people, with this culture? Thank you.
Can we collect the question? Thank you for that reflection. We'll deal with it. Can we have one more question, please?
Thank you. I'll be short. 10 years on, are we any more wiser in making our decisions? How do you perceive the politics of climate change today?
Well, last time when we presented this book at the Karachi Literature Festival, Mehjabeen said something, and it's a very famous Native American saying that to know where you're going, you have to know where you're coming from. So this is what our book is. It's a history. It's a compilation of where we are coming from, and now where we're going. With CPEC, I think it's going to become even more difficult, the decisions that we have to make in the future. And I think, I don't know about the wise part of it, but I think maybe Mehjabeen, can you?
Well, you're asking what the result of the book is, and all we have is to offer ourselves. You do too. It's a short passage through life, and you have to decide as a young person what it is that deeply moves you and what you want to share with the rest of your society. So this was our choice because we felt so powerfully about it. It's our small contribution to returning our perspectives to a humanity we all dream of. So it's a very small contribution, and we are perhaps someone like you will pick up this book. Perhaps it'll shape some of the choices you make in your life. So ultimately, a book is a very small offering, although a lot goes into it. So that's my reflection on your comment. I'm not sure I can answer it just now.
I think we've been seeing the frantic finish notices for a while. So with that, I would really like to thank you and Richard for going, seeing it all, feeling, understanding, developing a relationship with it, and then sharing it with us. And I hope the way it has inspired me, it would inspire others who read it, particularly the younger people who we trust will develop our relationship with water in a better way than perhaps we did. Thank you.
The books are available for sale. They're 25% off, especially at this festival. So please, if you have an inclination, do buy one.
Well, thank you so much, audience, for the session.